Hi, everyone. I'm Mara Webster with SAG-AFTRA Foundation, and thank you so much for tuning into another one of our conversations at home. Before we kick into today's conversation, I want to remind everyone watching that we are continuing to raise funds for a COVID-19 Emergency Assistance Fund that is working to support actors who are currently out of work due to all of the closed film and television productions right now. So please check out the link below this video and consider supporting if you're able to in any way. Today, we are so lucky to be joined by the wonderful Kristin Scott-Thomas and Sharon Horgan, who are currently starring in Military Wives. And I wanted to start by asking you guys, I know that, when you both said yes to the roles, that your initial in-person meeting, you actually spent more time just talking about your personal lives and getting to know each other than necessarily talking about the project. And I was interested in the way that really lent itself and built a shorthand that served itself once you were on set filming with each other, especially because you only had 5 weeks.
Yeah, I suppose it did without us realizing it. It was probably better spent doing that, I was just really happy to be making a film with Kristin, and I'm pretty sure I went there to chat about the film, but we just ended up talking about our families and more than that. And I remember leaving the meeting thinking I'd told her way too much. And it felt like, like a big sort of outpouring of personal details. But then we spent, we spent plenty of time together before we started filming, because we were involved with the sort of rewrite of the script, and they were very kindly sort of brought us in on sort of early meetings of that. And so we saw each other sort of here and there. And then the next time we sort of were together professionally was when we were rehearsing the songs, which was also a great way to find instant kind of camaraderie.
Yeah, definitely an icebreaker.
Yeah.
And it's singing as a group is a great sort of leveler. There's no hierarchy there. I could not sing. And having come into this project thinking, I can hold a tune, I suddenly realized that I've been giving the simplest harmonies, the one note harmonies, the oohs. and then, and people who didn't have such a prominent role in the film, in the story, were, super helpful to me, because, I just didn't know how to do it. So it was great like that, wasn't it? There was a great feeling of teamwork.
It really was.
It was really particular to that film, actually. It was a really good company, and that's something I sometimes miss in the movies. You get it a lot more in theatre, of course, but sometimes when you're making a film, you do feel a bit lonely, and this was definitely the opposite. You felt very, very supportive, and in a great gang of great girls.
Yeah, and Kristin, I wanted to ask you about some of the development of your character, because, she's watching her husband go off on a tour for the 5th time. So this is something that she's been through several times. And I was curious about the way that you kind of constructed her backstory and really thought about how her coping mechanisms would have evolved over time.
Well, yeah. How did I build her backstory? I think just with, you take what you've got there, and you take your own experience, and you take, other people, you talk to people. I spoke to friends of mine and relations of mine who are military personnel and wives of military personnel. What's it like when your husband leaves to go to war? How do you deal with that? So I was lucky to have access to some people I could know quite well to help me with that. And I spent part of my life on a military in a military environment, because I spent part of my childhood on a military base, and my father, my stepfather, my uncle, they're all in the Navy. So, I knew a bit about it. So I was able to kind of go there quite easily, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, Sharon, I know that before you were mentioning that you both did have the opportunity to be involved in some of the script rewrites and to really give a voice to your character that felt like your own as well. But I was interested in the way that you really dissect and analyze a script when you're coming into a project just as an actor, given that, when you're writing scripts, you're not just analyzing every single line, but you're also thinking very much about that character's interpersonal relationships with everyone around. So how does that really inform your process as an actor?
How does my script writing inform my process as an actor?
Yeah, in terms of the way that you really sit with and analyze a script and dissect it as you're mapping out your character.
I mean, do you know, I just kind of read it, and if I like it, if it moves me, if I feel like it's something that would be a bit of either a challenge or something I haven't done before, if it feels like, you know, it's of course it's down to the script, because the script is absolutely everything. But then it's sort of like, who are your sort of personnel? Like, who's the director, and who are you going to get a chance to work with? And, you know, what month is it being filmed? And am I not doing anything then? You know, I think I was excited about it because it felt like the kind of film that would reach a wide audience. And I think I'm sort of used to doing stuff that feels a bit smaller and a bit more niche. And I got excited at the idea of doing something that felt like it kind of had a broader appeal, and sort of seeing what I could do within that. But I would say, like, the most, for me, it was Kristin. I found it so funny that anyone thought of putting us together and thinking that would work. And I just was really excited by the notion of it, because I thought that could really work, you know. And I got more excited at the idea of that. But so yeah, I don't know. That's probably not a very interesting actor's answer to that question, but it's a bunch of reasons, isn't it?
It always is, yeah. No, and I wanted to ask you a little bit about building the dynamic between your two characters, because it's, you know, it's one of the highlights of watching the film, and you capture so many different moments and aspects of their relationship, from the animosity to the emotional support and friendship that then eventually evolves. So how did the two of you work together and figure out what those different beats were going to be, and what the different trajectories and moments would be within their relationship as it evolved throughout the film?
I think it came quite organically, didn't it? And we didn't really sit down and work it out. But you know, the writer was very sensitive, and because we were, as Sharon was saying, we were involved a lot in the progression, in the writing of the progression of where would we be at each moment in the film. But when we got to, I remember when we were doing the big showdown scene between the two of them, we both rather tentatively said, well, don't you think we could be a bit meaner?
Yeah.
And we said we should really, really go for it. And we should be just foul, horrible, mean, you know, foul-mouthed and unkind and vicious.
And for it also to not sound well thought out. Yeah. You know, for things to just sound a bit stupid or angry or broken, you know.
And I think to be able to do that with an actor, you have to have absolute trust and faith in them, that they're not going to think, oh, she said that. You know, they're not going to be hurt. And they're not going to be hurt by it. They're going to trust you that you're doing it from a good place as well. You're going to trust their generosity. And I think that's something that we found quite easily. But I remember the first time we discussed this, I was a little bit nervous about your reaction about Rachel was the writer, and about Peter's reaction. Would they think I'm an absolute cow to suggest, you know, being horrible like that? But actually, you quite enjoyed it and joined in.
I did. I loved it. I think that's why it works, because it's so vicious and so awful, and they're both so taken aback by their own, not just what was said to them, but what has, you know, come out of their own mouths. But I think it's at that point in the film, we sort of built up this thing, you know, that starts as a love-hate, which is always just so much fun to watch. It's really fun to watch a sort of, you know, odd couple sort of sparring, trying to find your place and, you know, not being able to. And then the development of that, you know, how they slowly got to know each other and how the barriers kind of came down. It felt really naturally done, you know, it felt quite organic, but it also felt like with Kristin, it was easy. It's why we didn't we didn't really need to spend too much time sitting around. I think it just, you know, I think they chose the right people to play those parts together, you know, because
good casting.
It was good casting, essentially, yeah.
And Kristin, I wanted to ask you a little bit about your character in terms of the fact that, she's developed this very hardened exterior out of necessity, but there's so many moments where you allow the emotion to really kind of seep through, and even sometimes just in very small moments. So I was interested in the way that you thought about crafting that out and where those beats would be, that it would really just hit her unexpectedly.
I think it's quite important when you've got a role like that is, you don't want to bore people by immediately being an audience, by immediately being too emotional. You have to be quite parsimonious with it. Yeah. And just give little hints, I think, so that there's a suspicion that you might be quite unhappy, but there's not confirmation yet. And then let the audience say, why is she being so awful? Oh, perhaps it's because she, let the audience do the work. I think that's the most important thing when you're playing somebody like that. So you just give them little snippets of information.
Yeah, it's done really beautifully. And then Sharon, I was interested in how you constructed your on-screen relationship with Robbie Gee, who plays your husband, who's off on tour, just because I think there's such an interesting way in which there's such a layered facet to this relationship, and it feels very dimensional, but you're really only ever on screen in one scene together. So how did you think about the way that you were going to play that without him necessarily being there as a scene partner?
Oh, jeepers. Well, he's just a really fun, nice person, and is the kind of actor who just immediately puts you at ease. And we again just got on really well and started we had to get over, our awkwardness of only just having met each other. And then, we're like having this, quite intense, quite, I can't think of the word, but we end up falling into a cupboard kissing. So we were just, it was kind of like working out the the physicality of it was what we spent most of the time doing, because that scene weirdly had all sorts of different placements. And it got taken out of the cupboard. And then I was like, please, can we get it back in the cupboard? Because there was something so awkward about a goodbye or a moment of affection that ends in a fall, and I, not just because I'm a clown or anything, but I just kind of felt like that's sort of real life. You fall over, or you have an awkward moment when it's supposed to be a tender moment. And so it was mainly, we spent a lot of time just trying to work that out. It's a weird little scene. There's so much going on in it. With her just sort of trying to get everything up in the cupboard and him sort of following her around and just trying to have a moment of lightness, and she's just refusing it. But yeah, it was, it took a long time to get right, but it was because he's so easy and lovely and was happy to just keep playing. We just had to keep sort of doing it and getting it wrong and then having another go.
Yeah, and I wanted to ask you both a little bit about when you were filming the music performances, because I know that, Peter kind of came in and had 2 cameras, and I was curious if that kind of allowed a lot more fluidity in the moment, because that there's multiple coverage happening at one moment and you're not necessarily having to perform to a specific position in terms of thinking about the camera as much.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a complicated shoot, because there was so many people. It was such a big ensemble all the time, pretty much. I mean, there was occasional one-on-one scenes, but the majority of it was an enormous ensemble. So for us, there could have been more cameras, and it might have made life like. But
I think we were because there were so many of us, and because we were doing specifically music and we were concentrating on that, I don't think we would have noticed if there'd been 8 cameras or 1 camera or no camera. I don't think we actually noticed any of that, because we were so concentrated on, the task at hand, which was getting this song right.
And also there was so many other more complicated things to think of because of the, because of our earpieces and because of, the whole sound department was suddenly at the forefront, and usually they're a little bit more, not the last thing you notice, but I mean, it was there was a lot to sort of manage and a lot to sort of think about, and just being able to get through a day where we made our scenes. I mean, often not, but you know, getting to do your bit and feel satisfied that you did okay was kind of tricky enough, because there was so many things to think about.
Yeah, and with such a large ensemble cast, you know, I know that everyone was coming at this with different variances of experience. Some people, it was their first feature film. Some people had worked more in theatre. And so I imagine that everyone came in with very different working styles at the beginning. So how did you all set about navigating that and really creating a cohesive ensemble in terms of the way that you were all approaching acting as well on set?
I think, to be honest, I there again, I think it was the music that did it. I think it was the music that helped us get to the same place, you know, get to the same kind of, you know, again, I don't know who was more experienced in theatre, television, movies. I don't know which was which out of all those people, because we were all doing something that none of us really knew how to do anyway. So we were all in the same place. You know, as I said, it was a great leveler. You know, it was great.
Yeah, and I know that you mostly got to film the musical performances with the ones where they're more cohesive later on in production. And so what was that experience like on set when you finally got to film the Albert Hall scene all together?
It's very emotional, wasn't it?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, Kristin, I remember like having to keep it together because I was so worried that I was going to cry. I was just thinking about what Kristin was saying earlier about, you know, just holding back. Like, don't, you know, just because you feel the tears coming, like don't sort of give into it necessarily if that's not the right place. And I found it really hard because I was so moved by that moment when we sing Kate's line, you know, her son's line, and I was like, oh shit, I don't think I'm going to be able to look at her because I'm just going to go to pieces. And having to sort of hold it together was a thing, because, and I think the big thing was thinking about what the women would have done. They would never have let themselves, they would have like held it together, you know.
And we did have because we were shooting, all of that was green screen. So you really had to imagine the audience there and think, I'm not gonna cry. It's, you know, when you've got to get up and read something at a funeral or something, it's like that. You've got to keep it together, and that was exactly the same feeling. But there, on the other hand, you did have, it was your question about cameras again. There were cameras sort of all over the place on that, weren't there? Yeah. But there were more of us by then, you know, because gradually we get more and more and more of the choir together. And they were just, it was really, you felt the power, the protection that the other women brought. They gave you, that sort of gives you strength to be able to sing your line and not weep.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, it was massive in that way, how much we ended up sort of relying on each other. And you know, I mean, obviously to keep yourself in tune, sometimes you'd sort of, you know, we're all singing different harmonies. We're not professional singers. It's all new to us. And like a sort of look to your right or to your left. And there was just so many gorgeous faces around you, just sort of letting you know that you were on the right track, or, you know, and it felt like that the whole time. It felt like everyone was sort of in it together, and everyone just wanted everyone to do well.
Yeah. I love something that you were both saying recently about how one of the first questions that you each asked yourselves was, how can I really make this my own and really bring my voice into this project and into this character? And I was curious, kind of looking back on the experience of filming it, what you each individually feel that you were able to bring so uniquely to this character, into this performance in the film.
Kristin?
No idea.
I mean, it's really hard to answer that question without sort of tooting your own horn, but I would say that, you know, the film really needed to avoid being too saccharine or schmaltzy or any of that stuff for it to, you know, be as emotional as it could be. I think there's something about holding back a little, or, you know, that can help it be more emotional in the long run, like we were sort of saying earlier. But I think you know, I think that there's a hard edge to those characters, and there's stuff clearly going on underneath that sort of helped avoid that. So I think maybe that bringing that to it, you know, a sort of ability to play it as real as possible without having to, you know, mine any sort of any schmaltz.
But I think the thing about Kate, that was another thing that was interesting for an actor in this character, was that she is a woman playing a role herself. She's the woman playing this role of Colonel's wife. So she feels that this is the way she should be doing it. This is the way she should be head girl. This is the way she should be the leader. And then you see her in other moments when she's obsessed with mattresses and kettles and knives online, and having a drink of wine in the middle of the night, and worried sick about her husband, and trying to keep grief at bay. So you see all that, and then you see this other person who walks out bossy and neat as a pin, and decided and knows what she's doing. You know, that was a really interesting part of what we were being asked to do, or I was being asked to do with that particular role, is a role of a woman playing a role.
Yeah, well, when I saw the film at Toronto, it offered such brightness and light in amongst, 12 hours a day of independent cinema. So it had a really unique connectivity there. And even just rewatching it the other day, it made me feel, more connected to my family and friends in England right now, who obviously can't go visit. So I hope that this really provides a lot of connectivity to audiences watching it throughout this. And thank you so much to both of you for taking the time today.